will now reconvene the March 15th, 2022 regular meeting of the Lompoc City Council. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Vega.
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Present.
Councilmember Cordova.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jeremy Ball.
Present.
Mayor Janelle Osborne.
Here. Mr. Malave, any reportable action from closed session?
Mayor, the City Council met to discuss the two items on the closed session agenda with the staff, but there was no reportable action.
Thank you. If you'll please join me, the invocation will be done by Pastor Joy Price, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please pray with me. God of all, we gather this evening to praise your name and to show our gratitude for all that you provide. You have given us these leaders who work for the betterment of our community. We ask that you share wisdom and strength with all who lead us. Help them to open their hearts to all the citizens of Lompoc and give them peace when making difficult decisions. You have given us a community of wonderful, diverse people who wish to give back to others and seek your guidance in how to serve one another. We pray that you will lift up those lives, that those who live with difficulty may be identified so that the rest of us might care for them. You have given us life that we might rejoice in your creation, that we might nurture your creation, and that we might honor you in all that we do. We pray for comfort and hope in hard times, and we pray for joy in the good times. Tonight, we lift up all those in our community who serve us, for first responders, counselors, teachers, city workers, and all who work to make Lompoc our home. We also pray for the people of Ukraine and others caught in wars that are contrary to your way of peace. Keep them safe. We ask all these things in your blessed name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now we'll have some presentations, and we did have a presentation for Arbor Day this past weekend on Saturday, the 12th of March. California celebrates Arbor Day a little bit earlier than the National Arbor Day, and I want to thank the Lompoc Trail Committee and all of the volunteers that showed up. It was a massive turnout of the volunteers, as well as our city staff who pre-dug all the holes and delivered the trees and the dirt and the mulch and all the water. So it was an amazing day, and I just want to say we now have 65 new trees at River Park and Riverbend Park that we normally don't. The next proclamation will be for Equal Pay Day, and we have Miss Lucy Tom Harrington with the AAW to receive it. So I know there is a bum leg involved, so if you want to sit while I read, you're more than welcome. And then I will come over and present it to you. I appreciate you coming out despite the equipment that you had to drag with you. So. And it's times like this that having family around to support you is one of those really important things. So I'm glad her husband was here to help her get in and out. So this is a proclamation regarding Equal Pay Day. Whereas more than 50 years after the passage of Equal Pay Act, women, especially minority women, continue to suffer the consequences of unequal pay. And whereas according to the U.S. Census Bureau, women working full-time year-round in 2021 typically earned 83% of what men earned, indicating little change or progress in pay equity. And whereas according to Graduating to a Pay Gap, a 2012 research report by the American Association of University Women, the gender pay gap is evident 1 year after college graduation, even after controlling for factors known to affect earnings such as occupation, hours worked, and college major. And whereas in 2009, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was signed into law, which gives back to employees their day in court to challenge a pay gap. And now we must pass the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would amend the Equal Pay Act by closing loopholes and improving the law's effectiveness. And whereas, according to one estimate, college-educated women working full-time earn more than $500,000 less than their male peers do over the course of a lifetime. And whereas 4 in 10 mothers are primary breadwinners in their households, and nearly 2/3 are primary or significant earners, making pay equity critical to families' economic security. And whereas a lifetime of lower pay means women have less income to save for retirement and less income counted in a Social Security or pension benefit formula. And whereas, according to the census data in 2018 in California, the earnings ratio of women was just 88%. And whereas March 15th symbolizes the time in 2022 when the wages paid to American women catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year. Now therefore I, Janelle Osborne, Mayor of the City of Lompoc, California, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 as Equal Pay Day in the City of Lompoc and urge our citizens to recognize the full value of women's skills and significant contributions to the labor force and further encourage businesses to conduct an internal pay evaluation to ensure women are being paid fairly. Ms. Harrington, I present this to you. I'm not sure if there's any words you'd like to say. I will. Awesome. Come on up. Of course you're here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Vega, Councilmember Cordova, Councilmember Starbuck, and Councilmember Ball for recognizing the necessity of bringing light to this pay gap that faces all of us and affects all of our economies. AUW stands for the American Association of University Women. We're a nonpartisan organization, and at the core of our mission is equity for all, and at the core of that is equal pay. So we've worked very hard to bring to light some of the statistics that Madam Osborne had mentioned. The organization is working to continue to bring opportunities to girls, to women, to females, and to live our mission of equity for all. So thank you for this recognition of this important challenge that faces all of us. And on behalf of myself, I'm the co-vice president of programs at AUW, as well as all of our board and all of our members, a couple of which are with me tonight. Thank you very much. And I wanted to also invite you to the Changemakers Celebration, which is a program celebrating the accomplishments of women in our community, making positive change for all of us. They represent 4 leaders from 4 different sectors. It's going to be on March 31st from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Grossman Gallery in the library. We'll also be available on Zoom in dual languages, and we'll leave a couple of flyers outside the door. So thank you again for this proclamation, and thank you for your work for the city.
Be sure and pick up the proclamation on the, oh, you got it? Awesome. I couldn't remember if I'd handed it off to the assistant or not. Thank you for coming out this evening. All right, our next presentation is from the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, and they'll present an update on the Santa Barbara County Broadband Strategy. And I see Executive Director Margie Kern with SBCAG is here with some of the team members.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you so much for having us again. This is the presentation to kick off our effort that we talked about a couple weeks ago to join the coalition that you voted to approve of the Memorandum of Understanding. So with that, I would like to introduce Maria Kelly. She is with Broadband Consortium of the Pacific Coast, and she is going to be giving the presentation today to give you the overview of where we are right now in the planning and the strategy development and where we go in the next few months, and hopefully at the end, what some of the results may be and the schedule there for all of this work. So with that, I'll pass it over to Maria. Thank you.
Thanks, Margie. Good evening. Thank you for having us. Appreciate being here. Why are we here talking about broadband again? I'm going to run as quickly as possible, but I talk fast, so if you need to slow me down, just slow me down. Prepare to ask any questions. Why we're here is because of the California Broadband for All. It was signed in 2020, so I'm going to touch on that a little bit. What are we talking about when we're talking about this regional activity? What's the project plan? What's our timeline? What are the deliverables that your community should anticipate getting out of this project? And what are your future considerations as we talk about broadband? You have a lot of great infrastructure already in place, so your conversation will be a little bit different, but from a regional perspective and how these conversations happen together are going to be really important. So why are we talking about broadband at a regional perspective? At the state and federal levels, all I did was pull out some really high-level legislation that was signed in 2020, 2021, 2022. California Broadband for All is what's driving a lot of this work. It's for future planning, 100 up, 100 down, speed, accessibility, affordability. The legislation that supports that is SB 156. There's a ability for local jurisdictions to sell bonds. It's going to be an ongoing funded piece of legislation, so there will be money continuously. But the overall goal of California Broadband for All is to close the digital divide and ensure accessibility for all, for telehealth, workforce development, education, and all the other reasons why we have discovered during COVID we need to be connected. In addition to that, at the federal level, there's a lot of alignment, or what we're seeing is a lot of alignment, in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I pulled out Division F specifically because that's what we're using as sort of a guide for some of this project, is to be grant ready. Make sure we've got the data maps that highlight and justify our request for funding, grant funding and public monies, and then the Digital Equity Act of 2021, which is also accessibility for all, telecommunications and workforce. Why these are significant? Historically, broadband funding was given to the private sector to deploy. New legislation out of the state and federal government is for the public sector to participate. So funds that are being identified are for public sector participation, and that's really, really different from the CPUC, California CPUC, as well as in all this other legislation. That's why we're here that's why we're all talking about it. So this project plan and how it's gonna line up, for every single community and county within Santa Barbara County, we're doing this exact same set of steps. We're convening cities, we're convening ISPs, we're convening local community members to collect data to make sure that we understand, actually have a really good comprehensive picture of each community and how, as we plan forward, how everyone's gonna be fitted together. We'll be providing some mapping tools, and I'll cover this at the very end, but we're doing a lot of high-level analysis of mapping so that your community and other communities will have access to the same GIS mapping tools so we can see where our infrastructure can connect. In addition, coordination will be providing high-level policy recommendations by community, and we'll complete the regional roadmap, and then we will have put together what are the grants that your community could apply for, again, to target that affordability, accessibility, and speed, with the outcome with middle mile strategies, last mile approach, and digital inclusion. Want to mention that part of the planning, what we're planning towards, which is the best case scenario for redundancy and resiliency within a system, is fiber to the home. That's the long-term goal. While we're talking about digital inclusion, it's fiber to the home. So we're not talking about like the next couple years. This is probably a 10, 20, 30, I have no idea, but it's like gonna be a long project, but we're getting started. This is the general timeline. So we are on track in February, March. We're starting our convenings and doing our outreach, really presenting now at the community level. There will be additional engagement at the community level over in April, May. And we're starting to make sure that we're reaching out to our ISPs, which means it's all our telecom and internet providers. We need competition to drive the affordability and also provide the infrastructure partnerships. So we are on track with that, and by March, April, we'll have a pretty good idea of what our mapping assets will be, and we have a GIS person that will be connecting with every other community GIS to make sure we've got all the information we need. With the goal to wrap this completely up by November, we would hope to be back to your council in September and October, providing our final summary and recommendations, and actually have the same we'll be doing the same presentation again to all the cities and providing you with the final product. So what are the outcomes? It's a strategy document. In the Broadband for All portal, you can see all the other communities in California that have started completed strategy projects. Santa Barbara County is being very forward-thinking. There's several other counties that have taken a regional approach. Our level of detail with all the cities participating is very unique, and I can forward email links, or I'll forward an email summarizing some of that, where you can find that information under Broadband for All. Significant resource for long-term is the GIS mapping tool, which will have the asset mapping, so we'll identify all sort of, and again, Lompoc already has this incredible infrastructure from your being the electrical provider as well as your Wi-Fi, so you already have a lot of the assets that we'll be able to pull up and identify where the gaps might be or where we can enhance. Looking at the future state, where do we need to get to from here? And then the plan on results, middle mile, final mile, and digital. And most important of all, why we're doing this work is for digital equity inclusion, keeping people connected and getting connected. For your local consideration for future conversations, and again, thank you so much for participation with the SB CAG. We have some of these conversations during our ad hoc meetings, but we already know who the main point of contact. I've already met with Rich a couple of times. Rich. I was hoping he'd be here. I want to meet him. Had a great conversation with him and have put him in touch with our GIS person as well. We're developing a survey to identify other infrastructure and make sure that we have a clear picture, so when we make recommendations, we know what the community already has. The GIS mapping, again, really important because it's an open access tool that will be available to all jurisdictions with the data that we collect. And coming out in the next week, we'll be doing direct community outreach on a needs assessment survey, speed test, and you will be able to track that, some of that through the speed test results link, which are all in dark blue, you can't see. Mental note, we'll be sure to we'll be pushing those out and meeting with all your public information officers and others to make sure that we get a uniform push on that. So we want to get the data. What is coming up quickly, and we'll be reaching out to your city manager and team, is the technical assistance grants that are coming out from the CPUC. This is the first round of grant funding, and we keep following up. We found out now that we think it's going to be live the first week of May. Santa Barbara County cities should be in a really good position to be able to put in applications for those technical assistance grants. They all will be on a rolling basis, and it's up to $500,000 per community for purposes of planning and staffing and whatever it is that needs to be done to, again, close the digital divide. So that's going to be a conversation coming forward. And then discussing how, as you're looking to put in these applications, ensuring that broadband is an annual budget conversation and discussion is something that we'll want to be making sure is in front of you. And then, again, always looking future forward is continuing to participate in all those discussions that are going to be around coordinating regional efforts. What's the infrastructure going to look like? What's the team look like? How are we going to implement this amazing strategy that we've put so much energy and time in together? So implementation is going to be a big part of future conversations. And that is it. Bill Simmons and I are part of the Broadband Consortium who are doing a lot of the project in collaboration. We're doing the coordination and the data collection and the analysis piece of it, but the team also includes the SB CAG staff and Sam Cohen and Econ Alliance and REACH. So we've got a really robust group of people doing this, and I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later.
Councilmember Ball.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions as we're starting to get into some of these details. So again, whatever you can help us with. I noticed one of the things you talked about, there would be some education packets coming our way maybe in August. Is that something that we can have ahead of time before we get too deep into this, or what would those look like?
Part of the education packet is really going to be geared towards that digital, like what do we need to be doing to ensure digital inclusion and digital, what are those steps that we need to be taking? What grants are you going to qualify for? So that's still evolving based on the data that we collect. We'll be able to put together sort of, what do you need to know as a community? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the education packet. And it may change. We may find we're missing something and we need to step back and add something extra, so.
Sure, and I know we're a long way off from the end zone on this one, but there was the mention of us having an annual budget discussion on this. How, again, that's a moving target. We have no idea what that means. How should we approach that or
Part
consider
of,
that?
that's kind of one of the things under the broadband resources, under Broadband for All, and I think I've sent this out a couple of times, but there's sort of a checklist, sort of a public, what do we need to be considering? And it's making sure that we're checking the box, that we're having, we don't know what that discussion's going to look like or what the need's going to be to have the discussion, but identifying it potentially as a budget priority might check the box for a grant, right? So it's more, and we'll know more as we move forward, but that's sort of where that comes out of, is that what's the community, what's your approach to broadband and planning, and again, as we're moving towards more of a fourth utility type of mindset, where does it fit into the framework? So we'll look at that.
Thank you. And one quick last question. So you'd mentioned the technical assistant grants.
Yes.
Now, do you feel like the city of Lompoc, and maybe someone in staff, are we at the same table as every other city? Are we prepped and ready to jump on that? Do you need us to confirm that we're going to chase that grant, or?
We are collectively trying to keep everybody up to speed as much as possible, and we're tracking that on an ongoing basis from CPUC, is because we want to be at the front end. There are communities that aren't even really aware that this is happening yet, so we're trying to keep us on the front end. But yes, absolutely, once we know what those criteria are, you should be able to, and again, it's on a rolling basis, we should be able to get that information together that you need and make sure that you're prepared to write those grants.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah. Could you go to the last slide, please?
Sure. Yes.
I think Councilmember Ball just asked the question, but where it says include broadband in annual budget discussion as a priority, well, I'm kind of curious as to how much money are we expected to set aside? Our broadband currently is $3.8 million in debt. We owe a huge debt on our broadband now. Is there a grant we can get to pay that off and start anew with you?
I hope so.
Me too. Is there one?
I have no idea. So again, based on the data collection and depending on what the public funding is identified, and I don't want to go too far into this because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not
an accountant.
as adverse at the technical pieces, but there are, I don't even know if I want to go down this, but RCRC, there are people within the state government where this conversation is being had. Like, what do we do for those communities that have sort of, is it sort of the loss? And when we're talking about fiber, yeah, I shouldn't minimize it, I apologize. But how do we figure out how to help bring you up to speed and somehow not make it a burden? It shouldn't be a burden on the public sector. Having the public sector have access to funds to invest in infrastructure, it's not meant to be a burden. It's meant to figure out how to become a public-private sector partner. Don't have a final answer for you on that.
The people of Lompoc own their power company,
Yes.
and they have loaned broadband $3.8 million already. Well, more than, but are still owed that. And now we're looking at annual broadband budget allocations, which we start here in another year.
No, I apologize. It shouldn't be an allocation. It's just a priority for discussion. There's a nuance there, not to allocate funds,
It
but
says as a priority.
as a priority for discussion. So when you identify and you're saying, what are our top goals this year? What are our priorities? It's homelessness, it's economic development, it's, whatever. Just ensuring that within that conversation, I'm not saying what the allocation should be, but as part of the conversation to make sure we're checking the box for other grants, it's
I
important
mean,
to have the
let's face it, as a
conversation.
governing body here, our allocation should be to pay off our debt back to the people's electric
100%.
utility.
Totally agree.
So well, you see where I'm going
Yes.
with this, and I don't know what we can do. We've committed, but now we're committed with empty pockets.
Well, the goal is to not have it be a negative revenue or even be a negative. And I'm happy to meet with you and talk with this in depth at any time. If you want to,
At the budget hearings.
at the budget hearings or before, happy to do that. I'll have a better answer for you.
Councilmember Ball.
Just real quick, it's probably fair to keep these two things separate, just for the community to know that whatever Lompoc has done, made choices on, let's call it narrowband, because it's really bad Wi-Fi for the last decade or so. This has nothing to do with updating that system, has nothing to do with that. This is us literally plugging into fiber the fastest we can get and making sure that we get equitable application of that, or access to that speed
Access,
across the city. So again, I don't want us to hold the past hostage. These are two separate items, but the ultimate goal is to get the fastest access to internet as we possibly can. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
That's the goal of the state and federal and local communities.
I appreciate you answering all the questions that have come up so far and taking on this work. And I do believe, given some of our prior lessons learned can make the next investment better. And I do believe that making broadband a priority discussion is absolutely the first step, because you're right, as much as it hasn't been stated at both the state and the federal level, the idea is funding to implement and improve, and part of it being a public-private partnership is to potentially understand that this is a utility.
Correct.
And not all utilities are provided by private entities like the city of Lompoc, where all of our utilities except natural gas are provided for us. And there is an opportunity potentially to turn our broadband around and make it a public utility that is, in fact, making money, which then would allow us to pay off that debt because we had invested and become a true fiber
Provider.
network.
Yeah.
Exactly, which is far more successful historically and a moneymaker in communities that have done it. So there is proof out there that it can be a win for the community, both financially and for equity for all. Councilmember Cordova.
I just want to make a comment to the public. Whether we choose to move forward past, once we get the strategy information that's going to be provided by this consortium, or we choose to stay in the dark age, budget discussion should be a priority no matter what to address, whether it's our past debt or whether it's to address the future. So that should be a priority no matter what.
Any more questions for our guests? Or I should say contractors at this point, because we're part of the contract.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, seeing none, I again want to thank you, and I look forward to the next reports. And when we have the information for the surveys, we will put them out on our city Facebook page and support the press release and through our chambers, and make sure that we get as much data as possible from our community back to this group doing the deep dive for us. So I'm sure we'll be getting our money's worth. So thank you.
Thank you.
for coming
Thank you
out.
so much for your time. Thank you.
All right. Okay, our next agenda item is the city manager report. Mr. Albro.
So last week I was able to attend in Arlington, Virginia, the National Summit for the Association of Defense Communities. And actually one of the things they talked about was the infrastructure bill, and that they are proposing $65 billion to be put into the broadband. So I don't know what the details are to that, but hopefully you'll get more information coming down on that. I also got to sit on a lot of really good sessions for the LCC grant, and like I talked about, the infrastructure bills and a lot of stuff that's coming down the pike. For the edification of the group, the old CC stands for the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperative Grant. That's the grant that we're working on with the base for resiliency for water, wastewater, electric, and also transportation, land use, and climate change. I wanted to just take a real quick and say thank you to the mayor for coordinating a meeting with our House of Representative Congressman Salute Carbajal. I thought the meeting went really well. We were able to give them a lot of good information about the old CC grant, but also about the status of Lompoc and how we're doing here. I definitely appreciate your efforts, and also Erin Keller for her efforts for making us look good. I also wanted, I know you mentioned earlier, I wanted to thank Mario and the Park and Rec group and their division, and also volunteers for everything that you did for Arbor Day. And like you said, we had 111 volunteers and we planted 58 trees, and I thought that was pretty awesome. So thank you, and that's all I have.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to consent calendar. We'll open the floor for consent calendar. You have 3 minutes to speak on consent calendar. If you'd like to call in, the number to call is 805-875-8201. I'll go ahead and read the process for consent calendar while we wait to see if anyone calls in. All items listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted after one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the council vote. Any items withdrawn from the consent calendar for separate discussion will be addressed immediately before the second oral communication near the end of the meeting. Madam Clerk, did we have any written communication on consent calendar?
No, ma'am, nothing.
All right. Seeing no one rise and no phone calls on consent calendar, we will close public comment, and I'll bring it back to council to see if there is any item to be pulled or questions asked. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yes, I'd like to pull item 2, please.
All right. Any others? Seeing none, may I have a motion
I'll give you a motion.
to accept everything but 2?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion for 1, 3, and 4 by Councilmember Vega and seconded by Councilmember Ball, and we will discuss item 2 after oral communications. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right. There are no staff presentation, announcement, or requests tonight, so we will move on to oral communications. This is your time to speak on city matters. If it's on the agenda, it'd be preferable to wait till that, but you may speak if you need to. Now, the number to call, again, is 805-875-8201. The floor is open, and you have 3 minutes.
Deb Andrews, Lompoc. Once again, I want to express my gratitude at the improvement of the appearance of the entrance to City Hall and the parks. I was at Beatty Park recently, and it's such a lovely place for Lompoc citizens and families. So glad the orange plastic fence is down from the Warrior Memorial. The flag is ripped at the memorial. It needs to be replaced. I'm not real sure who's responsible for that, but that should certainly be a priority. I was surprised to see COVID signs still up at the entrance or near the playground, that beautiful playground that we have. And I was very surprised to read what it had on the sign, that all people over 2 years old should wear a mask. There should be no eating or drinking at the playground so that the mask is never removed. Ensure face masks are worn at all times. Plan ahead to visit the park at different times or days to avoid crowds and waits. Know when to stay home. Elderly individuals and people with underlying medical conditions should avoid playgrounds when others are present. Those signs should come down. I think the COVID flu scare is over. We're on to the scare with the vaccines, and people are going to be held responsible in their positions for what they've done with this whole situation, including your oath of office, the unconstitutional measures that were taken. The Pfizer vaccines are now identified to have different ingredients in different batches. There are certain codes to identify those ingredients. Those batches that have increased spike proteins are supposed to be given to the frail population. Those codes would be evident to those in the healthcare community, and they are going to be held responsible for those individuals that were murdered or permanently disabled.
Are you still there? Okay, just a reminder to lower the volume in the background.
Good evening, you're live in the Lompoc City Council meeting. You have 3 minutes to give your public comment. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Terry Doutney, and I wanted to thank you all for your service. It was interesting to hear about the broadband, and I'm glad that that is being pursued. I did not hear all of the women ahead of me, but thank you for caring about the lives of the citizens of Lompoc. Thank you for keeping the mask mandate in effect as long as you have. I'm alive. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, did we have any written communications?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Thank you. Seeing no one else rise and no calls, we will close oral communications and bring it back to new business. Item number 5, adoption of the urgency order number 1892, authorizing temporary outdoor dining through December 31st, 2022 at restaurants and food service establishments to alleviate economic hardship and preserve public peace, health, and safety. And we have our Community Development Director, Christy Alarcon, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, city staff, and members of the public. I'm Christy Alarcon, your Community Development Director. For your consideration tonight is an extension of the temporary authorization of outdoor dining at restaurants and food establishments. In July of 2021, Council adopted an ordinance that temporarily suspended city regulations that prohibited outdoor dining of city businesses until December 31st of 2021. Many businesses have utilized the outdoor spaces to reduce the economic hardships created by restrictions which reduced indoor seating capacity. So fast forward to today, many of the mask mandates and other safety measures have been lifted. But with the uncertainty regarding the emergence of new variants and a lot of unknowns at this time, as well as the short amount of time it would require for some of these businesses to make permanent changes to their facilities, staff is recommending that we continue to allow outdoor dining through the end of the year of 2022. And then just so you know, we're not going to just wait until the end of the year and then let them know you can't do that anymore. Hopefully by like July, before the end of the year, staff will start reaching out to those businesses who are continuing to have outdoor dining setups that violate city codes or other policies, regulations, and we intend to provide guidance as to how they could continue to have outdoor dining, perhaps in a manner that is compliant with city code and regulations, so it could look a little bit different. So tonight, the official staff recommendation is to adopt the urgency ordinance 1892-22, or you can provide alternate direction for staff to help our businesses kind of continue to adapt and increase their revenues however they can at this time. So that concludes my report. I thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Why can't we just make it, change our code and ordinance and make it a permanent part of them and allowing them to do business like this? Why do we have to go reach out, see if it's working, guide them through a process? It's working now. It should work 2 years, 4 or 5 years into the future.
So it's working now, but for some of them, they are not only violating city codes, but they're in Caltrans right-of-ways. That's not our call to make. They've just been lucky and haven't gotten in trouble for it. Other items are, some are set up in ADA parking spots, so they're in direct violation of codes that protect accessibility for disabled persons. So we would want them to relocate their outdoor dining to a spot that is compliant. And some of them are taking up parking spaces, which were parking spaces that allowed them to, or were their required parking spaces for their venue. So whatever their operations are. Some of them, they probably don't have to make a lot of changes. It's probably really minor, and there could be some code, whether they're variances or changes that we can make. But I don't believe there's a way to make a blanket, all of you are okay, go ahead and do it. There's been a few, and they're not a lot, but that have some major issues.
Yeah, so this will be something that'll come back in July for an update prior to just doing something again in December?
Yeah, so what my intent is to reach out to all of those business owners with, sit down with planning and probably fire will be involved in those conversations, and have the list of the businesses and say, what things do you think they need to address? Or planning, what do you think we could have some flexibility in, and kind of do it on a one-by-one basis and let them know that, whatever they have, whether it's non-compliant or what the issue is. If it's an ADA parking spots that they're using, then where could they relocate it? We don't design it for them, but we can at least let them know they have other options.
Councilmember Wall.
This is an interesting one. I strongly believe that we've got some of the best weather on the planet, so anytime we get a good, beautiful day and can eat outside, we should take advantage of it. Councilmember Starbuck does bring up a good point. It is kind of a fact that we're willing to let people be out of compliance at least until the end of the year, and then let them know, obviously sooner that they're out of compliance and they need to make adjustments. I would just hope and ask that we be as sensitive as we can, because there will be a few people that are out of compliance right now, trying to hustle and make it work and pay the bills. And I just hope that in December, at the end of December, they don't wait till the last second and then it's a overwhelming burden upon them that they're not prepared for. So I just hope that we're sensitive. For me, I wish we could do this forever and ever. If we have to re-up it every so often, that's fine with me, but I think this is a good thing.
And I think the piece here, the reason we were able to do it was because of the pandemic and the urgency ordinance and all of those things. That may not continue forever, and that was our little wiggle room to say, yeah, go ahead and do that. But at some point, we have to start enforcing our codes, and our codes aren't just things we make up because we want it to be that way. It's usually us following state law or other laws. So obviously, where we can be flexible, we will, but there will be some, I've seen at least 3, that are going to have to take them down. So we will let them know that, but they now will be able to go to full capacity and occupancy inside their buildings. The mask requirements are gone, the social distancing is gone, so there's really no reason to continue to do it in some cases. Where others have some space that they could build outdoor patio seating, then that's great, they can do that. But others just kind of slapped them down in their ADA parking stalls, and that's not appropriate. But we allowed them to do that. So right now, if they're listening, or you go to that establishment and you chit chat with them, remind them, end of the year's coming again. Should have ended into last year, but we're giving them a little more time to decide what they want to do.
Awesome. Do you have a rough idea of how many establishments might be impacted by Caltrans right away in this context?
My understanding, there's only 1 or 2.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Cordova.
Ms. Alarcon, do we have an idea of how many total businesses are still using outdoor space for dining facility?
Well, there's a lot that have compliant outdoor dining space, but that are not compliant. We have not fully looked at, we've never seen their plans, so, you know, what they're doing right now could very well be compliant. They just haven't submitted anything. But since the whole COVID thing, the ones that kind of popped up, I would say we probably have 14 at this time, last count.
And then when we're talking about, you know, making these changes and informing them of it, I understand all the circumstances that are involved and why we would need to do that in certain locations. Is it possible to also then consider bringing back to the council and letting us know how many total we would be dealing with before the end of the year, since you're saying the end of the year is going to be the anticipated cutoff, should the council decide that at that time? But since you're saying by July, you're going to really start working with them, could we just get like a brief update to the council, hey, there's 20 or there's 14, and then that way we know what we're talking about? And then also, if the council should choose to accept this tonight, could we also, so this would be for anyone that's already existing?
No.
So if it's somebody opened a business today, they could sprawl out in their parking lot, but why would we want to allow them to do that if you're already saying that by the end of the year, there's a possibility that it wouldn't happen?
It would be a poor business decision on their part. But no, if this ordinance is in place, we wouldn't be able to tell them, you can't do that.
Okay.
But
So
we
I
would
just wanted that
advise
clarification
them.
then. Yeah.
We would definitely advise them, just like we plan to do with everyone else. And I think what might be helpful for council is to come back with just a simple presentation that shares, this is how many letters went out. I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable sharing what businesses.
Correct. I'm not asking for that.
The number of letters that went out, those that responded and are trying to address them, those that responded and completely removed them. They just said, oh, yay, COVID's over, we don't need it. Thank you for letting us do that. And then those that maybe, because there will be those that don't comply and don't respond and just figure I'll just keep under the radar. And they may be in for a little surprise because I will very likely have a code enforcement officer on staff by then. And that will be something that he will be handling, or she.
Councilmember Vega.
I'd like to make a statement to council that the businesses, also with ADA compliance, there are a lot of people that have gotten sick or will still be phobic, so to speak. And maybe we should look at a couple of leniencies in our code prior to the end of 2022 for people that are not comfortable sitting inside still because someone got sick or someone, and maybe part of the ADA is also to allow some sort of outside dining in a limited capacity, even if it does change. So I'd just like to mention that, because there's a lot of people that have passed away, and there's still people getting this stuff. Regardless of what the state says, they're going by numbers. We just need to take care of our businesses and make sure that our people feel good when they go out so that the businesses do have an opportunity to thrive. For people that are still and will be impacted because of COVID. So it's not just a matter of what's written, it's a matter of what we want to do and how, if we want to put some leniency and some sort of a, I would say give them a little bit of leeway for some people that might just want to eat outside, as you mentioned, Jeremy. You know, there's some weather here that regardless, maybe the ADA, it's an issue, but we should implement the ADA as far as outdoor dining for people that are phobic and don't feel safe. Thank you.
Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, I was just curious, and I'm not sure if you or the city attorney can advise. I was just curious, how does it work? I mean, if a person covers up an ADA space, you know, a handicap space, but we're letting them not be in compliance, are we out of compliance with the state in some way, and in that's a requirement from the state? Or has the state said, that's fine, you guys make up the rules, and then you can disregard ADA compatibility? How does that work?
My understanding from our building official is that while we have this ordinance in place because it's for a short period, we're not necessarily conflicting with ADA laws. We're saying just for this short period, we're making some allowances. That doesn't mean that if a woman in a wheelchair goes to park at a restaurant and can't find, let's just say it's a small strip mall, and they're using all their ADA parking spots and there's no parking at all, she could very well bring a lawsuit against that restaurant. We aren't liable as the city, but that restaurant owner is liable. So I think oftentimes businesses or community members that are adverse to complying with many of our regulations, permitting, policies, they feel that we're doing it just to collect money or whatever the case may be. But it's truly to protect the safety of our community and our residents. So having clear access paths for our fire trucks to get in there, right now, I mean, you wouldn't even be able, I don't even think our fire truck could get up in there to get in front of that place. And like I said, that individual whose accessibility was compromised, she could choose to file a lawsuit. So we are typically protecting the business owners when we ask them to comply with the ADA laws.
So I really appreciate you clarifying on that, and I want this to be on public record so that a lot of our business owners, they know, because what can happen is that maybe somebody decides to sue them, and then they want to say, well, the city said I had till December to do this. So let's be very, very clear that the city doesn't have the right to waive all your compliance with state regulations when it comes to ADA.
What I would add, Councilmember Ball, is they were compliant when they received their building permit and their planning permits from us. They chose to place things that made them non-compliant. We're choosing not to enforce and say, hey, you need to take all that down. So I think that's the difference, is when they received their permit, they were required to do everything that was up to snuff. So.
Thank you. So if you're out eating and you happen to notice somebody's got a temporary structure up in the handicap parking, you don't have to be the law, you don't have to tell them what to do, but if you know the folks, you might consider telling them to reach out to the city and get some clarification on what's coming down the road later this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff before we go to public comment? All right, we'll open the floor for public comment on this item. You may call in at 805-875-8201. You may come to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Floor is open.
Deb Andrews, Lompoc. I appreciate the discussion, the questions, and the suggestions. I agree it should be made permanent. Those restaurants that want to include outdoor dining, the individuals that have maybe issues with parking for handicapped or fire department accessibility, those situations could be handled independently and worked out. I think the freedom and liberty and opportunity to do business should be the #1 priority. We've really hurt our small businesses with this pandemic. As far as new variants, President Putin is taking out 30 of our bioweapons labs in the Ukraine. There are 300 more worldwide. They had planned to aerosolize rabies, but that has been taken out. They will take out the others. I don't think we have to worry about new variants. They've been discovered.
Madam Clerk, did we have any written comments on item 5?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more calls, I will bring it back to council. Councilmember Cordova.
So just to be clear, Ms. Alarcon, or City Attorney, there is no ordinance that prohibits a business, a dining facility, from having outdoor dining if it is designed and there is space and they own the or the area that they're leasing is configured correctly. Correct?
Correct.
So please keep that in mind, that we are not prohibiting businesses from having outdoor dining facilities available to them. What we are going to potentially have to correct at some point in time or another is the allowance that we provided due to COVID measures to allow people to go ahead and use outdoor facilities that were not designed or programmed initially in their permit process as outdoor dining areas. So let's please not educate our public incorrectly. Let's keep in mind that I don't want to see any business close off outdoor dining, and I know that that's not the intent of what we're doing here. The only thing that we're going to have to look at some point in time is how, and it was provided in the presentation when staff said that they will work with each one individually, case by case, to determine and help them if they want to do outdoor dining. But they are going to have to be responsible for designing and incurring the cost of doing so, like every other business that already has outdoors. So I just want the council to remember that, because I fully support outdoor dining, but I agree that some areas will need to be looked at, especially when we're looking at measures that are prohibiting people from parking in certain spaces. And again, ADA is not something that we come down and we put laws or regulations in place. That comes down separately, and usually ADA parking spaces are designed to be closest, and they're designed to be in a specific manner so that it's van accessible or vehicle sedan accessible. So just keep all that in mind. It's not council's job to start abolishing regulations or laws that it does not have the authority to do.
First, I want to thank you for bringing this back. I know that with the emergency order out of the state, that hasn't been fully rescinded yet. At some point, that could be rescinded, and we may have to reconsider this sooner than December, but I do appreciate the extension and your willingness to go out and work with the community to identify who might be in violation once it is rescinded. So I think that's really being proactive, and I appreciate that. And again, the appeal would be to our local businesses that if having outdoor dining has been successful for you and you would like that expansion, even though you're able to return to full indoor, please come forward. We're here to help you. We're not here to deny it. We're here to identify how this might be done and how we can help you identify ways to maintain that outdoor dining. Again, we could have some things brought back to us that if they're under local control, we could reconsider, and staff would do that for us. But we need to know from you as the businesses what is working, what isn't working, and staff's here to work with you and identify what the violations are and bring it back. And for those that are potentially in Caltrans right away, that is also something we need to work on putting in connection with Caltrans, because I know during the pandemic it was sort of a pushback from Caltrans saying, we're not worrying about it if your city's not worrying about it, but that may completely change in the coming months. So if you need to work with Caltrans, it's an additional time and an additional layer, so please consider starting that early if it's something you want to continue and you are in the Caltrans right away. Councilmember Vega.
I'll make the motion to accept the urgency ordinance.
I'm sure you will. Thank you for that. Do I have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right, did we have any written communications we haven't already discussed?
No, ma'am, nothing.
All right. And we will discuss item 2 at this point. So, item 2 is acceptance of the 2021 General Plan Annual Report, which was pulled by Councilmember Starbuck. So we'll let him start his questions.
Thank you. I want to go at the 10,000-foot level here with a couple of questions. I don't very often get to discuss the general plan. It's as important a document as it is. status of the old ad hoc suggestions. I understand now the consultant's going to be here this Wednesday. I was informed before the meeting that we're going to have the consultant and we're going to take the ad hoc's recommendations for amendments to the general plan and start on Wednesday.
Yes, that is correct. We, as part of the housing element update, I included a proposal in that contract to address the ad hoc comments as well as some other elements of the general plan, so absolutely, and we will be meeting with them tomorrow.
Oh, that's a good thing. That's been stagnant for quite a long time. And
Yeah, it has, so we're happy to get into that, dig into those amendments.
yeah, well, it'll make doing the 2030 a lot easier for the poor people to get to do that. One of the other questions I had, and it's been a struggle since I first came on to council, is a vision statement for the city. We have a mission statement, but we've never had a vision statement. Is there any kind of a plan or something we can do to put a vision statement out there? You know, if you come to Lompoc, you want to read the general plan, see what's allowable and what's the vision for the city, and there's nothing.
Yeah, I can work with Ms. Alicorn to come up with that. I mean, we do have a vision statement, correct me if I'm wrong, Christie, for community development, but not specifically to address each division.
I know that there was a lot of talk about it many years ago, and it became a plagiarizing commitment to use other cities' vision statements and everything, but I just, something that we shouldn't just keep laying by the side there. The other question I had was, how many amendments to the general plan have we submitted? We really haven't got any updates. Have we done anything? You know, we're allowed 4 a year, and have we done any?
We initiated one last year regarding the Economic Development Committee, but then that was put on hold. We never moved forward with the Economic Development Committee, removing that from the general plan. So that was one last year that we just never finished.
We just didn't do it?
That was actually initiated by the council, and I think because there was other discussions, like for example with the chamber and other things, it was put on hold. We can certainly return that to the council.
I think Councilmember Starbuck, it was more cost effective to put them all together because we knew the housing element update was coming, just like the circulation plan element and the public safety elements. Along the way, we've known we want to update those. So given the very expensive cost to amend a general plan, how much is it, Brian, that our contract is for?
It's about $460,000.
Right, but we're stepping in and doing a lot of things council does no control with. So, I understand it, but there's minor amendments that are allowed, which would, one of the things I was told years ago was, well, if we did all of this at one time, it would force a review of our environmental impact statement, et cetera, but a lot of it was admin, deletion of certain things, and it wouldn't have triggered an
We
environmental.
sent that to the consultant and asked them, because in our professional opinion, we felt it would trigger other amendments needed. So in order to truly vet it and get another opinion, the consultant felt the same way. And so that's why we decided it would, in order to get those items amended that the ad hoc wanted to see happen, it would probably be more cost effective to do it in this manner so we get it all done. So, I mean, in reality, it probably delayed it 6 months.
Okay, so it was 6 of one, and now it's going to be half dozen of another later here, basically.
You're probably going to see a lot of things that are going to change from those, your minor things that you wanted to see changed. You're going to see how it affected, kind of with the snowball effect of changing a shall to must, or a must to shall, or a shall to should.
Yeah, shall, should, that argument went on for
Yeah.
a prolonged period of time.
I hear you.
I'm going to change lanes here. How important is our general plan for people outside of Lompoc? Now, the reason I ask this question is when you look at our urban design element, one of the key things on it, the second policy in there defines the city shall seek to protect ridge lines and hillsides which lie in view corridors, including those ridge lines identified on the scenic ridge lines and roadmap. Well, now we've been forced to build to the north, so we've lost our scenic view. We're looking at houses. Here in recent history, now we've put huge power poles along the ridge line on the southeast side of town. So the Planning Commission of Santa Barbara didn't review our general plan and say, oh, Lompoc doesn't wish to have this. They went ahead and approved it. It went to the Board of Supervisors. The project was approved. In the meantime, here's Lompoc going, don't do it. Our general plan says no. And of course, you know, when you look at the map, right where they put the power lines is where our, you know, our viewscape line is. So what was the sense of having the urban design elements with this statement about have nothing on the hillsides or ridge lines, and then bam, you know, we're forced north. Now the southeast is full of power poles. Who cares about it other than Lompoc?
Well, I will say this, that when projects do come in, not the project that you're talking about, but the community.
It would
is
have never came
sometimes-
to us though, Brian, because it's in the county.
Right, well, I'm talking about in the city. But the original general plan, when it was, or the last general plan update, which took quite a while, I think 6 to 7 years, that did get input from the county. But as far as our general plan, it's for Lompoc. So, I mean, I understand.
So we can't go up on the county property and put a pole up, but they can. So our general plan means nothing to anybody except us in Lompoc.
Well, it's for our community, yeah. It's
For our
the
community.
it's the vision for the community of Lompoc, the city of
Yeah.
Lompoc.
So there's something we might as well delete because it's really, we have no control over it, and it's to the north it's done. So
Yeah,
moving on with, you know, it was a statement. It's done. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just there. I'm here on page 26, and one of the things I find interesting here is Housing Authority of County of Santa Barbara, 3,249 Section 8 housing vouchers, 997 or 30.7% residing to low-income housing vouchers in the city of Lompoc, with an additional, you know, 113 previous public housings being converted to, you know, multifamily, et cetera. Is this percentage still exceedingly high based upon the numbers of the rest of the county?
I believe so. I don't know if Christie knows those numbers better than I do, but it is high.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a convoluted question. I think some of the things that we've shared in the past was our percentage of low-income, income-restricted units versus of that same makeup. For example, of multifamily units, we have about 30% that are low income or higher in some cases. So there's a lot of different ratios or numbers you can look at to evaluate that. But when it comes to the Section 8 voucher holders, those are portable. So they're kind of market driven. So a Section 8 voucher holder, whatever they're renting, it doesn't come off your tax rolls. They're like just someone, but a different form of payment for rent. And they could have got their Section 8 voucher and they could have been living in a unit in Santa Maria, and the landlord said, I don't want to rent to Section 8 anymore because I can get market rate. I know I can. So they do that. They kick that person out, and then that Section 8 voucher holder has 1 year to find a unit. And they're going to go where there's vacancies or where they will take Section 8. And more often than not, that is this community. So I think those numbers, while it's nice that the County Housing Authority shares those with us, it's just kind of the way the market drives where a Section 8 voucher holder can go. So they don't designate and they don't say, oh, we're going to put 5,000 in Lompoc. It's just people get a voucher and they're like, where can I find a unit? I only have a year. I got to find a unit in a year or I lose my golden ticket. And more often than not, they're finding the vacancies here.
Yeah, so we're holding 30% in the whole entire county, so still the answer. Yeah. I'm not going to go through a lot of these because I think it was going to be hashed out Wednesday with the ad hoc, but I do have, you know, on page 73, This is the economic development element also, but one that should have been taken out, where it says the city's business tax should be updated, modernized, and expanded, and 50% of the increased revenue from the revised business tax shall be used for economic development purposes. I thought at one point we said we were going to make this go away because we were not going to raise business tax on businesses, nor were we going to dedicate 50% of the business tax income to economic development, which was actually at that time salary. So is this, like, little ones like this are the ones that we can't do on a normal amendment?
You will be able to do that in this amendment.
Because it says ongoing, but we're not
That's-
doing anything.
So what you have in front of you today is the annual report. We're reporting on the general plan. Moving forward, we will be amending the general plan to which we
That's
will
going to
be.
be part then of what
Yes,
happens
if
tomorrow.
we decide to delete that and it's appropriate and the whole council decides that's what we want to see happen, that will happen.
All right, well, I didn't want to take a whole lot of time on
Yeah,
this.
no
but
problem.
there was a couple of things, and it really upsets me about how we're looked at outside, i.e. the huge poles on top of the ridge lines that, and here our general plan, that we have no control of our ridge lines, so why do we even have that element? But thank you.
Just really quick, tomorrow is just our kickoff meeting, so we're not actually going to be, making, significant changes at that, but it's just a kickoff meeting.
Brian, it took 6 or 7 years to do the general plan. I don't figure an afternoon meeting is going to get all these amendments done.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ball.
So I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this, but as going through the thing, through the whole 34 pages, there's just some things that, since we have a couple of minutes, maybe we can just highlight, because these are some issues that are going to face our community for the short term and midterm and for quite some time. On page 21, can you just remind us about the challenge of RENA numbers and what that's looking like for our community and what the impacts are going to be sooner than later?
Yes, absolutely, Councilmember Ball. So RENA is very challenging. We're going to go from 527 to over 2,200. Yes. So it's the regional housing allocation that the city has to plan for. We don't have to build those units, but we do have to plan for them as far as zoning and general plan designations. So that designation, or those numbers were passed down from the state to the local or the regional planning agency, which is Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. It went through over a year process of vetting out those different allocations for each city and county. And so the new number that we're going to have to plan for as part of the housing element update that's coming up that we were just talking about, we're going to have to look at our zoning and our general plan and find out how those numbers can be accommodated at the different income levels. So it's, even the numbers we have right now, which is 527, we're not even close to meeting that number. So it's going to be even more difficult. So we might have to come back and show council areas that would need to be upzoned in order to accommodate more additional units. And there might be even other creative solutions that we're going to have to come up with our zoning code to maybe allow housing in areas that you typically don't see housing because there's such a huge demand.
How time sensitive is the pressure of updating this?
Very time sensitive. So we have until February of 2023. They will give us an additional grace period of 3 months. So that's why it's imperative that we get going on this process. And last month, the council approved the allocations for that particular project.
Okay, awesome. Just a couple more here real quick, if you don't mind. On page 25, let's see here. Page 25. So this is just in following up on, you talked about the Section 8 stuff, just on one page before what Councilman Starbuck had mentioned. So it says that, let's see, the HACSB currently provides rental assistance to 3,268 households in Santa Barbara County, excluding the city of Santa Barbara. It is estimated that 875 or 26.7% of these households reside within the city of Lompoc. So again, I know it doesn't include Santa Barbara, but we're definitely out of whack with how much of that we have here. It's no fault of the people that have Section 8 vouchers. It's, I lament some of the decisions that have been made, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago in putting housing together and I understand it's very market-driven, but it is frustrating that we are definitely carrying the bucket on that issue there. That was just a point I wanted to clarify. And then page 31, this is a opportunity for you guys to remind us about what reality is and what the challenge is. So under code enforcement, as you all may be aware, we do not have a code enforcement person. So what is left, let's see, is I think you guys created the citizen concern form, and it looks like 267 submissions or complaints or concerns were submitted. Talk to me about the limitations of us dealing with code complaints without a code enforcement officer, and how often are we actually functionally able to respond to some of these complaints?
So for most of our code complaints, we have an amazing staff here at the city that wears multiple hats. If they are solid waste, for example, illegal dumpings in an alleyway or on city property, or I believe like even in our right-of-ways, those get handled and picked up and they're done. In some cases, other types that I receive are hoarding, or those houses where they have cars parked on their lawn and 5 motors and 3 carburetors, a puddle of oil and broken window, and list goes on. But anywho, those types, the way we handle them is our city attorney, our paralegal, she got herself a camera, and she'll do a little drive-by and take a picture, and then she sends a very sweet little letter that says, hey, please clean up your mess. I know it's hard. Please do it. Kiss, kiss. And they don't do anything. Sometimes they will respond and say, oh my God, yeah, that's my renter. I'm evicting them. Please, forgive us. We're sorry. We're going to get it done. And sometimes they do. But most of the time, and what's frustrating for me is I'll get 6, 7 complaints, and they're all different people. And they're like, why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you doing anything? And my response to them is, I am so sorry. The way we handle code enforcement is we send a kindly worded letter 3 or 4 times asking them to voluntarily comply. Then we might go forward with, and Jeff will have to provide the correct terminology, but basically where either we go in and clean it and then we slap a lien, or we use a little bit more strong wording and we force them to clean it up. But that takes forever, and community members get, especially if that's your neighbor, you get tired of it. Other complaints are encampments, and we all know how challenging encampments are. If they're on private property, we as the city can't go on there and pick up, the encampment. Even if it's an abandoned encampment, it's private property. That would be a gift of public funds if we start just going on there and cleaning up people's private property. So there's a lot of challenges with it. But there's a lot of opportunity to have a code enforcement team that works collaboratively with our homeless outreach team, with our commercial, businesses, with our police department, with all of our partners to really be effective. And we're missing that right now, and it's a huge challenge. It's a monstrous challenge. I've gotten maybe 2 or 3 applicants, totally not qualified. There's a shortage in the industry, and I think we could be a little bit more competitive in what we offer. So your code enforcement team consists of Dean, me, and a lot of other city staff that run out and try to see what's going on. So it's not my happiest story, and
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm a little frustrated with code enforcement.
Sure. The reason I brought this up is, again, as a reminder to the community that, it's easy to say, why doesn't the city do something about that? Well, to do something about that usually takes a person. And the reason I'm highlighting this is not to make your department look bad or to make a system look inefficient, but let me ask you a question. Of all of those sweet, nice, please do this letters that we send out, would you say we get 50% people to comply, 10%?
They start, they'll call and they'll say, hey, what do I need to do? And we tell them what to do. And then when they come in, they get like a permit application, but they leave their illegal structure up. There's no recourse. I mean, why take it down? There's no recourse to force them to take it down.
Yeah.
We're not fining them $500 a day for having it there. We don't have that in our code. Sure. So it's very, very difficult to get compliance. Brian has been really good. If it's something minor, if it's a sign and it's, non-compliant, but it's an easy fix that's not a high cost, he can call them. But that's labor intensive. He's calling them. You have your planning manager making 10 phone calls back and forth, coaxing somebody to just go and remove a sign that's non-compliant. But we're getting complaints all day from everybody in the world because they're frustrated because it's encroaching into the sidewalk or it's falling over and they're afraid it's going to hit their kid or whatever. So it's super frustrating.
So again, I'm very hopeful this year that in front of council that we have, look, this is a position that we've already funded, from my understanding, correct? So we're just looking for the right person that's qualified to be in that position. So bear with us, but it is of utmost importance that we do not create inefficient systems here at the city. So if I've got the city attorney and the paralegal working on sending nice, sweet letters that are ineffective and don't have any teeth and there's no enforcement, then over time I've got 2 or 3 people working at City Hall on something, spending time, spending hours, working, doing their diligence with no effect. And that creates a gross inefficiency. So it really is upon us, it's incumbent upon us, if we want to deal with some of these issues with the look and feel of our town and some of the things that frustrate our community, we really have to figure that out. So again, if that means adjustments or us prioritizing that position even more in upcoming discussions, I hope that we take that seriously. Thank you for that clarification. One very last thing, and Brian, if you can talk to this, page 34, there was grants received or grants in progress, and the only one I was curious about was Senate Bill 2, and part of it says it's intended for the preparation, adoption, and implementation of plans that streamline housing approvals and accelerate housing production. Can you just give me what does that mean? What does that mean for us?
So we're going to use these grants to supplement our updates to the housing element because it came in at such a high cost. A lot of cities and counties are dealing with large bills, so to speak, to update their housing element. So those are going to be used to update the housing element. But in order to kind of meet those parameters, we are going to look at ways that we can amend our general plan, maybe even the zoning code, but primarily the general plan, that can encourage and streamline housing and basically speed it up. For example, I know within the last year and a half, it's been brought up for like a permit-ready ADU. So a lot of cities have amended general plans and they've come up with programs for that. So that would be something that we do want to still look into. But in general, both those grants are going to assist us with our bills associated with updating the housing element.
Awesome. I'd love to learn more about that. Keep us updated on that one specifically.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Cordova.
I'll just slightly piggyback off of the code enforcement comments that Councilmember Ball made. Aside from inefficiencies, just because it's not allocated in the budget doesn't mean we're not spending money on it. And we might be spending more money through inefficiency by 2 or 3 people having to do a job, and especially if our attorney or his office is having to do something, it costs us way more money than if we would have a code enforcement team or an individual or 2, which would be more efficient and probably less costly. I also want to agree with some of the comments that Councilmember Starbuck made, but I think that when we say that our general plan is only for us, I believe that to be extremely incorrect because, in my opinion, our general plan paints the picture of how to view how we view our city and what the future of our city could potentially look like. So I know for a fact that when we're talking about agencies, organizations, developers, and even potential future residents, those people may be going on and looking at this general plan and saying, well, I want to know if I'm going to invest, $20 million or $30 million into this community, what is their outlook on what they're going to do as a community? So I disagree with us making that statement. I also think that it helps to paint the picture of quality of life for our residents. And if we're talking about a vision statement, I don't know. It was weird to me that we were talking about a vision statement and then we're saying it's only for us, but in reality, it goes beyond that. Which takes me or segues me into the question that I was going to ask is, this is a 2030 plan. And I know that it takes us almost 30 years to modify it or make changes. So we're 2022. When do we start working on the 2060 plan? Because I'm tired of looking at the 2030 plan, which apparently has nothing really to do with the current state of our city, in the sense, I shouldn't say nothing, but there's a lot of components in it that we say are really actually not what we're doing as a city, what we're practicing as a city. Some of those Councilmember Starbuck brought up. So when do we start looking at the 2060 plan?
That's a good question. Well, I'll work with Christy Alarcon on a budget for that. The cost to do a complete overhaul of a general plan is going to be very, very high. So we've used a lot of...
Brian, what was our estimate? I mean, we got an estimate. I thought it was like over $1 million.
It's probably pretty close to that. I mean, we're going to spend close to $500,000 just to do the updates that we're talking about for the housing element and the other ad hoc. And then we're updating the safety element. We have to introduce a new element called environmental justice. So all these things, and then there's the environmental review on top of it. So you'd have to do an EIR if you did the whole brand new general plan. So yeah, I would say probably $1 million.
So I want to make a statement here. The Community Development Department is not opposed to updating documents. We are not opposed to bringing things to a more current state. Our challenge is we don't have a budget line item for that. We collect a general plan maintenance fee for every project that comes into Lompoc. Everyone knows we were stale for a very long time, so there were no general plan maintenance fees coming in. So now we're at a point where, okay, we need to do this update, for example. We don't have enough money. Dean worked magic and found it, and I applied for some grants, and luckily we're stretching it to make it happen because this is a state mandate. That's why we're doing it now. This piece, we have to. So yes, I agree. But when you guys are talking budget, that's another one to have in the back of your head is, hey, do we need to set aside so much per year so we could get this thing started in 2025 or whenever? But that's a lot of money to save in 5 years.
Right, understood. And that was the point that I was going to make is that part of it also has to do with our ability to plan for the funding of some of these items that we know need to take place. And so I just want to remind the council that it's not just us saying, well, when is this going to happen and when is that going to happen? A lot of the reason why a lot of our stuff becomes so stale and outdated is because we fail to plan economically. And I know that we have these financial challenges in our community, believe me. So I'm saying today, it's 2022, can we start planning and really thinking about what is this going to cost us, as Christy said in 2025, or Brian said, to start really thinking about some of these changes and what it's going to look past 2030, because it's 2022. And it's going to take us that long to plan and that long to figure out where we're going to get the money from.
Thank you for the robust discussion. I would have one request, that as you're making these adjustments to the general plan to bring back to us to review, could you note what was an ad hoc recommendation versus what is a consultant recommendation? Because I know there are several of us here that don't agree with the list that the ad hoc presented, and not knowing what that list actually looks like. I think it's important for us to understand what recommendations came from the ad hoc versus the consultant. because listening to all the things we fall short on and the money we lack, removing the economic development element out of this is bad timing, because one of the things we need to do is have an investment in our community, and lack of that tells the community, outsiders looking to invest, that we don't care about economic development. So it's with trepidation that we would remove that element or change it too drastically. Updating it, absolutely, but removing it or changing certain aspects of it that were written for modernization would be upsetting. So I just ask that.
Yeah, I do believe there'll be some public workshops and things of that nature as we work with the consultant. So you guys are going to be involved all the way.
Thank you. Councilmember Ball.
No, I just wanted to piggyback off of something Councilwoman Cordova said, and she said this phrase, I don't know, several months ago. It stuck with me. It's very simple, very basic, but we really need to think about buckets. Buckets, buckets, buckets. How are we, with all of these unfunded things that we have, ongoing costs that we have, new costs that are arising, new mandates, I'd love for us, and she hit it on the head, is like we have to figure out how to start putting money in a bucket for something that we don't have to pay yet. And that's a new habit for Lompoc. Lompoc's always been behind the 8 ball and trying to catch up. But as we have improved resources to a point, it'd be nice for us to start a new practice of playing with those buckets. This goes in there, we don't touch it, this is for the future. Our community deserves that type of thoughtful investment. Thank you.
All right. I think all questions have been asked. We already asked for oral communications on this item earlier in the evening, so I will look for a motion.
I'll move that we accept consent item 2.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
And we have a second. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes 5-0. All right. Final oral communications of the evening. If you would like to speak on a city matter, you have 2 minutes. If you'd like to call in, the number to call is 805-875-8201. 805-875-8201. And we'll give it a little time for that to go out to the public. All right, seeing no one rise and no one calling in, and we've already asked for written communications, we'll close oral communications and go back to council. Councilmember Ball.
Just 2 quick things. Thank you to the mayor. She had to be in Washington, D.C., so I got the opportunity to step in and attend, for the first time ever in my whole life, actually go to the Little League fields here in Lompoc and see and celebrate with them their opening day. Oh my gosh, over 400 kids showed up. Great coaches, lots of families. There was no parking I had to park 1/8 of a mile away just to get there. It was just exciting to see our community come together and be really excited to play baseball. And anyway, that was really great. So thank you to the mayor for giving me the opportunity to step in on that. And then just before this meeting, at a few minutes before 6, I ran over to the Flower Festival office, and they had a chamber open house there, and we got to meet a lot of the board and meet the Flower Festival queens. My whole point there is that it is exciting to have the Flower Festival coming back to Lompoc. We have a lot more to learn about that and what their goals are, but the time is going to shift from a little later to May 6th through 8th. So again, Flower Festival is coming back. Let's do our best to help make that the best one ever. Thank you.
Councilmember Cordova.
No reports.
Councilmember Starbuck.
No reports.
Councilmember Vega.
Nothing to report.
All right, as has been mentioned by our city manager, I did attend the Defense Communities National Summit in DC along with him last week, and the city did pay for that attendance, and that is on behalf of the Old CC grant work, and it was very educational. Some really great meetings were held, and lots of exciting stuff on the horizon. I attended the Santa Barbara County Elected Leaders Forum to address homelessness last Friday, as well as the Vandenberg Space Force Base Annual Awards Dinner, and so congratulations to all of those individuals that won this annual award from the quarterly award selection. And also a shout out to Bob Hatch, who is retiring as the honorary commander to the base. He has an award now named after him. He was the first recipient, and the award is named after him for those that volunteer and work really hard to connect and support the base. And then we also had the Santa Barbara County Area Government's Broadband Ad Hoc meeting that I sit on, which led to the contract that we currently are part of, and all of the amazing information and data and connections for potential grants we'll be receiving as a result of that partnership. So a lot of things are going on in our community. One of the things that happened this past week while we were in DC, the Congress and the Senate, and then President Biden signed the omnibus that was voted on, and $900,000 in federal funds have been awarded to the Lompoc Health Clinic. So they will be getting a new generator and improving the facilities and updating it with that funds. The Lompoc Parks and Rec have a lot of things going on. One is a drop-in volleyball as for adults on Tuesdays for 18 and over from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Anderson Rec Center. There is a lifeguard training again starting on March 25th for $200 from 8:30 to 5 for 3 days. So go to the website and find that information. And then also the adult yoga classes beginning on 4/6 for 4 weeks at $40. And then Vandenberg Space Force Base is looking for the volunteer docents to help with the plover season. So 2 hours a month, you can contact the base through this email address. It's rather long, but I think it's important that we as a community participate in protecting that beach and understanding what's going on there. They have shut down a portion of it, but they keep the main area open despite the violations, but our goal is to not have those violations. So please consider giving 2 hours a month to help out from March to September. The contact email is 30ces.ceie.naturalresources@us.af.mil. I really appreciate stop giggling. All of the volunteers that turned out this past Saturday to plant trees. It was amazing. All of the high school students from the FFA programs and other programs, all of the community individuals that came out, they were done within an hour and a half and had expected to be there all morning. So you really showed this community cares, and I think there's lots we can get accomplished if we have more events and more volunteer turnout like we did. And so I look forward to those opportunities and just want to thank our community for showing how strong it is and how exciting it can be if we invest our time. So we'll adjourn our Lompoc City Council meeting to the next regular meeting at 6:30 p.m. on April 5th, 2022.